never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
I mean, what's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stones.
Am I going to get sued?
We go legal on this?
I like football season, and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're back. We're live on YouTube. The chair's squeaking. There might be some buzzing, but we're ready to go. No, we're ready to go because it's edge defender time.
I hope there isn't buzzing. We've literally torn this building apart.
There's
looking
not.
For the
There's
source
not.
Of the buzzing.
The audio's back. We're ready to go. Again, I don't know how the squeaking's annoying me. I don't know if it's doing that for you. Quick reminder, tomorrow's the biggest show in podcast history.
Yes.
How's that?
That's good.
Any podcast.
Good Roganing.
Any genre, it's us. How do you say genre in
Genre?
Irish? Yeah.
How do you say it in Irish? You
Yeah.
mean like an accent rather than...
I don't know.
It's a French word.
Queen's English, you always correct me on stuff. There's no way you pronounce that the same way we do.
Genre.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's a French word, so we're all theoretically
I figured you just,
their pronunciation.
you just made something up.
Creating your own.
So we're going to do some rankings. It's edge defender time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of players, a lot of people talking about the edge defender class being really deep. And I think the consensus board has something like 12 to 15 on there. I didn't get the final count.
Yeah.
My consensus board.
I think it is deep. It's an interesting group. Again, like this draft across the board seems to be very strangely composed when it comes to where the talent is. There's a few guys at the top that I really like, and then there's like 10 guys that I don't want any part of that are going to go in the low first, high second, maybe even the third round. And then there's like a ton of guys.
This edge defender. You're talking about the edge
that I
defenders.
love as projects. But that's kind of the same with a lot of these positions where you're like, love a few guys up top, then don't like anybody for a while, and then love a whole bunch more. Like wide receiver was a little bit like that, where nobody likes the top of this class. But once you get past a certain point, it's like, give me them all.
Give me all the picks from 100 to 200. That's where I want to select players. Maybe 75.
Yeah.
Starting around 75.
That's why you love the Rams draft.
Love the Rams draft. They're going to get all sorts of players that we love in the 5th and 6th round. PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance investment and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day or draft night. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Talk.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this will be a top 10 ranking, I believe, from each of us and some sleepers.
I'm not joking. I'm good.
Yeah, okay.
What if we were like a real live show? And I did this every time.
I mean, you kind of do. Not every time, but the frequency with which you've done that is quite staggering relative to the number of times we've been sitting in these chairs.
Just a little food stuck.
For example, how many years have we been doing this podcast? I think that's happened to me once.
I average a couple per year.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
It's like, so how,
good now.
This is a hell of a tangent, but how often do you get hiccups?
Not often, actually.
So my wife and daughter get hiccups a lot, like multiple times a month, maybe several times a week, depending on the thing. I get once a year, maybe twice a year. I can remember like the individual occasions that I got hiccups because it happens so rarely. They're like constantly getting them. That's like you with the choking.
Yeah.
Always at it.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. It happens. Yeah, I'm like your wife's hiccups.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk edge defenders.
Okay.
Let's start theoretically.
More than the hiccups?
What's that?
More edge rusher, more than hiccups? Is that's what we're shooting for?
Yeah. Something like that. What are we doing? Let's discuss. We went through this stretch. Just in the PFF era, we've seen both Bosa's, Myles Garrett, Chase Young was a prospect at that level. We've seen TJ Watt come in. So by my numbers, the way I'm judging it, we've seen 5 elite edge defenders come into the league. Guys that have played at an elite per season level on average for their entire career. And it's the 2 Boses, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, and then Max Crosby by these numbers have. Just per season, looking at WAR per season. In prior to PFF grades being available, we saw Von Miller come in, Khalil Mack, J.J. Watt, however you want to describe him, edge. He was started as an interior player, whatever. But we've kind of hit a lull of the elites over the last couple of years as far as edge defender goes. There's a whole bunch of good, solid players that have come in, but has that skewed our, like we said the same thing about Aiden Hutchinson last year, like, hey, the numbers love him, but he's not the Boses or Garrett. And we might be saying the same thing about Will Anderson this year.
Yeah.
Did those guys skew our perception a little bit, and now we've settled into this run where you can get good, solid edge defenders, but you're not going to get these elite stars?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime this is like the conversation of there's no Jamar Chase in this draft class, as if that's a reasonable bar to set in the first place. Like the idea of there's no Bosa in this draft class. There's no Myles Garrett in this draft class. I mean, sure, there probably shouldn't be. We're talking about literally the best edge rushers in the NFL. That's not a reasonable expectation that the best player coming out of college in a given season at a specific position will end up being one of the best in the NFL. That feels like just an unrealistic bar to be setting. So, yeah, I think expectation should probably be that the best player at a position in the draft is probably only going to be a good NFL starter, not a great one.
It also makes me rethink. We always, edge defenders always get mocked high, and you've mentioned this before. Like, why can't you put a cornerback at number 1?
Yeah.
In hindsight, last year, should Sauce Gardner have gone number 1? Not because of the fit or the team, just because he's the best non-quarterback and he should have gone number 1, right?
Yeah.
Sauce Gardner, a cornerback. But we're more likely to do it with edge defenders, which I think makes sense. When Myles Garrett is there, when a Bosa is there, they are the safest because they're the easiest to project, and not just project a good player, but a great player. But we haven't had that over the last couple of years, but we still put a bunch of edge defenders in the top 10 mix, and I'm wondering if that's really what we should do.
I think the argument against the cornerback thing is the safety and the certainty aspect of it. So, yes, taking an edge rusher is so Sauce Gardner should have been the number 1 pick last year, I think. And we did make the argument a few times during that process that should have been a bigger conversation. That why are we talking about Trayvon Walker versus Evan Neal versus Aiden Hutchinson? Why are we not bringing the cornerbacks into the conversation? But critically, we were using the term cornerbacks, multiple.
Yeah.
And Sauce Gardner came in and was an all-pro and looked like the best cornerback in the league in year 1. Derek Stingley, who, let's not revise history, was, this was essentially a coin flip. We love both those guys. They were both elite cornerback prospects. Derek Stingley, year 1, was getting lit up. Now, it wasn't maybe as bad as the grade or the production looked. He was in tight coverage for a lot of that time, and I think the potential for him is still there to be really good. But if you look at that as a sort of binary equation, one guy was a star, the other guy was not, and very was not year 1. It's probably a safer bet to take the edge rusher most of the time, because as much as you might miss, certainly when you're reaching for a guy that hasn't had production at college, but if you take a guy with Aiden Hutchinson's profile, say, really good college production, bordering on elite of elite, has the measurables, the only real knock on him was the stumpy T-Rex arms, right? So that's a pretty clean prospect to be taken at the top of the draft. I think that will have a much better strike rate than the top cornerback prospect, even if the payoff for the corner hitting is way better.
That's the equation, though. It is like trading stocks, right? You have safer, you have more volatile, you have confidence levels and all that stuff. We had a higher confidence level in Aiden Hutchinson, but if you listen to our podcast last year at this time, we did a whole bunch of that. He's not the greatest, he's not the best, but we feel the best about Aiden Hutchinson, or even Kayvon Thibodeau.
Right.
Hitting as players. Trayvon Walker was like the home run swing that the Jags made last year.
But I do agree that it should be a bigger conversation consistently. Like, if you want to come down on the side of the edge rusher safer, we want to go that route anyway, fine. But it should definitely be getting talked about more. Like, we just seem to default to the idea that a corner can't go number one, or a wide receiver for that matter. Like, if there is a Jamar Chase in a given draft class, that guy should be in the conversation. We're going number one overall, absent of the quarterbacks. Like, if we're in one of those drafts where quarterback is not going number one, we have to decide who is. It's always edge rusher, offensive tackle. Why are we not talking about corners and wide receivers? And I think the argument is even better for a wide receiver at this point, because I think the safety is more than the cornerbacks. Like, we're getting pretty good at spotting these elite wide receivers coming at this stage.
All right, man, you ready to get into the rankings?
Yeah.
We did this last time. So last time we did this with corners. You and I have not seen each other's lists.
Blind
Lists. And we both just kind of like went through our ones and twos, and we'll see where there's crossover and all that stuff. So you can start it. Who is your number one edge defender?
Yeah, it's Will Anderson.
Oh, there's no drama.
No.
Me too.
Yeah.
Some people don't have Will
And it
Anderson.
should be. I mean, we thought this from the sort of first viewing and from just general tape watching, et cetera. And when you go back and you look at them all one after the other, it's Will Anderson, and there's no conversation for anybody else. There really isn't. He's head and shoulders better than anybody else in this draft class.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Look, I think when you start doing rankings, there's a little bit of contrarian in everybody. Nobody wants to just do the same thing as everybody else. People like liking things that are different. And I know that I have a degree of that, I think, more than the average person. I like strange things, I like unusual things. I like things that not everybody is loving. If you hear endless hype about a movie that everybody loves, my natural inclination is to not want to love it, So I was looking for reasons to be lower on Will Anderson. And as well, because he's got a little bit of that concern from a data standpoint. He's not quite where the Bosa's were, or where even Aiden Hutchinson was. And so I was kind of looking for reasons to go, can I justify dropping him out of this number one spot? And you really can't. Like, he's just so much better than everybody else. He does, as much as this, he might not have a Bosa type of profile, he still has the best statistical profile essentially in this draft class, particularly when you pair it to the size, athleticism, movement skills, all those kinds of things.
And I'll give you some numbers on that, too. I mean, Will Anderson's one of the best run defenders we've seen since we started this thing. Number 2 per play run defense grade since 2014. The people that are dropping him, I don't think they're purposely being contrarian. Chris Sims, look, we had him on the show. He has Tyree Wilson number 1. He's not purposely being contrarian. He sees what he sees. And I'll say this, too. I'm only lower on Tyree Wilson. We'll get to it. I'm only lower because I'm looking at numbers that are taking into account his entire career. And if you just watch the film from last year, it doesn't take contrarian to say, Tyree Wilson's doing some things that maybe Will Anderson's not doing, and that's how you kind of get to that conclusion.
I certainly think most people that have weird rankings are well-intentioned. I also think there are other people that just want to be indie,
That's fine.
Want to be different, and it's like, I can't have the same thing as everybody else. Nobody's going to notice. I got to put out some weird ranking. I'm not going to say I get Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson. I don't really.
I don't get it, but I mean, I understand how people get to it.
Maybe
but
that's
me getting
there are also rankings out there that have Will Anderson like 4 or 5, and that's just.
I don't get that.
That's just absurd. Like, I cannot. Remember we talked about it yesterday with tight ends. I can't actually get into the headspace that would put Dalton Kincaid 4 or 5 in this tight end class. Same with Will Anderson. I cannot get to a headspace that would put Will Anderson 4 or 5 in this edge rusher ranking. Like, I can't accept the number of things you would have to overlook or not care about to reach that conclusion. Like, I think at that stage, again, it's the draft, it's a crapshoot, nobody knows anything, but it feels like you're willfully shooting for the 100-to-1 shot to make that call. You know what I mean?
Our friend Pete Prisco is in the middle of tweeting this right now. Tyree Wilson is going to be a star.
Of course.
I'd take him over Will Anderson.
Yep.
So I'm going to give you some numbers that say otherwise.
Yeah.
Will Anderson, using the draft model, which has a very good success rate, obviously. Will Anderson's the only player, the only edge defender in this class above the 90th percentile. That is a very strong cutoff for finding elite players.
Yeah.
Here are the last few first rounders above the 90th percentile. Last year, Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson. 2021, Jalen Phillips. He's been the best edge defender from that class.
Yeah.
2020, Chase Young. 2019, this one's interesting. because I had differing opinions at the time. Montez Sweat, going backwards here. Montez Sweat, Cleveland Ferrell actually was over the 90th percentile now, and Nick Bosa. Prior to that, you've got TJ Watt, Hassan Reddick, if we projected him as an edge, Myles Garrett, Shaq Lawson, Leonard Floyd, Joey Bosa, and then the first year, Vic Beasley and Dante Fowler.
Yeah.
So you might say, well, Beasley's bad and Cleveland Farrell's bad.
You're talking
and
about
Dante
a
Fowler
one-time NFL sack leader there, sir.
You
Put some
did
respect
lead
on
the
his name.
NFL in sacks. That
Now
one.
in the XFL, right? I
think
saw
he
him.
is, yeah.
I saw him in a game this weekend somewhere, or last weekend, whatever the hell. I had one of those random-ass leagues that's currently playing right now. By the way, the XFL St. Louis Battlehawks, offense led by Bruce Gradkowski, PFFer. They're one of the better teams. I saw them number 1 in the power rankings recently.
Bruce's.
Yeah.
Bruce's squad.
And that was before they lost the game, so, But still, they're doing well.
I mean, he's got the best quarterback, right? A.J. McCarron was by far the best quarterback that was.
Sir, that's some Ben DiNucci erasure that's going on right there.
Oh, sorry. Ben was going on. Forget it. Stop getting me off the rails here, man. I'm bringing some good data to the table, and you just brought it to the XFL. What's your deal, man? Like, Crisco's just tuned in because he wants to hear our takes.
I just lead where the information points me, and that there pointed me to the XFL.
I'm just saying, I've got some strong data that says Will Anderson is not only the safest, but also the most likely to become a star.
Yes.
And that's with all the caveats that, look, his pass rushing grade compared to Aiden Hutchinson and these other guys, it's not as good. It's about 65th percentile among NFL prospects since the last few years. But the run defense profile is strong. The pass rush is good enough. Will Anderson's the safest and best player, I think, on the defensive side of the ball. I can make the argument for Jalen Carter as far as best defensive player, but I think at edge, it is very clearly Will Anderson. The data likes him a lot.
Yeah.
Because of his entire career, his entire body of work. So Will Anderson, number 1 for me as well.
Yep. I really don't have much on the negative side of his list. He misses a few more tackles than I'd like to see, but we're really nitpicking at this point.
I didn't watch him for a while. I didn't watch him recently again. I had a pretty good feel for him. What did I?
He has a lot of
did I
those
write down
plays.
anything interesting? Here?
He has quite a lot of those plays. Where you sort of dive at a dude's ankles and grab like this.
He does fall off to 19% missed tackle rate.
Yeah, but so when you dive at the guy and you sort of wrap like this, not always. A lot of the time, somehow he seems to just miss. The guy's leg skips out of the wrap.
Falls off too many tackles.
Yeah.
But pad level, short area burst, contact balance, independent hands, rip move.
Look at you hitting
all of it.
Buzzwords.
Yeah, a lot of buzz. A lot of good buzz.
Did you have appropriate levels of glass eating in there? Because that was a great Lance Zierlein one that I found the other day.
What does that even mean?
Glass eating, it's one of those classic scout. It's like the 5-tool dude. It's a proper old school scouting buzzword. Glass eater means gritty. Nasty.
Great. Who's your number 2 edge, man?
This is where it gets weird right away.
You getting weird right off the bat?
Getting weird right away.
Who you got?
Will McDonald, the 4th from
What?
Iowa State.
He's your number 2?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's really good.
I was not expecting that.
He has stupid levels of lateral quickness. Can just sidestep a lineman before the lineman even moves. It's insane. He's got bend. He can sustain a really tight angle around the hoop, run the edge, the classic pass rushing thing. I'm a sucker for that, by the way. Remember last year I had Drake Jackson really high because he had the best
I love
lateral bend around the edge, that classic pass rushing thing that everyone wants to see.
I love when you have a type.
What else is he good at? He's just good at everything. He's really good at hand work. Gets blockers off him immediately, readjusts quickly. Had a 92 pass rushing grade against true pass sets. So when he actually had a shot at making a play, it's a slightly weird defense there at Iowa State. It's that 3-3 stack deal.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of adjust for that a little bit. I think he's one of the best pure pass rushers in this draft. He's so good at rushing the passer.
I can't stand when colleges do that. I'm just tweeting out that you're breaking the rankings right now.
There's a lot of defenses that annoy me with how difficult it is to project where they're putting players.
We've discussed this before. So Will McDonald, not only, by the way, is he 237? Is that right?
Not ideal. Don't like it.
So you've got a guy who's 237, and if you put him in the wide 9, right? You just let him go, burst off the edge. that would be the best usage.
Yes.
And then you get to the film, and it's like, why is he playing head up over the tackle?
Yeah.
We call that a 4-5 technique, right? Depending on your shade. He's playing what?
You're just bringing all the jargon today.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain to our listeners.
It's fine. I love it. I like it.
And that's a role that, like, old school, like as I was retweeting the 2001 draft last night, Justin Smith would play. That's what a 290-pounder with crazy length is supposed to play. But Iowa State and others have guys that are 240 pounds playing that role. And what I can't figure out is if they recruit players with one skill set and then put them into a different defense, or if they're like, oh, we didn't know Will McDonald was this guy that could be this elite wide rusher, but sorry, that's not the scheme we play. You're here. You're at Iowa State where you have to play the role you're playing. Or maybe he's just the best for technique on Iowa State's roster, which is nothing like what he's going to do at the NFL level. But all of it's very annoying.
I think it's more the latter. It's like you recruit good players, you get good players, and then you figure out how to shoehorn them into your system. Like, if it's not his ideal fit, okay, fine, but this is what we run, and you're still better at it than the other guys because you were a good player that we recruited. So this is what happens.
Some people are asking about our Chris Sims having Will Anderson at 5.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's crazy. I really
do.
I completely disagree with that. Again, if people want to put Tyree Wilson 1, I can at least follow the line of thinking to get there. I'm not following it with Will Anderson at 5. Like, anything where Will Anderson's lower than 2 feels like a stretch to me, But I can understand where people might not absolutely be enamored with Will Anderson based off the film.
Again, I really can't get into the headspace that gets Will Anderson down as far as number 5. And isn't he? Yeah. So he's got his rankings: Tyree Wilson, number 1; Lucas Van Ness, number 2; Nolan Smith, number 3; Will McDonald, number 4, and those are all in the same tier. So it's Tyree Wilson, tier 1; those 3, tier 2; and then Will Anderson at number 5 behind those guys.
All right. So Will McDonald, I have him at 6, just to go forward a little bit here. I have Will McDonald at number 6. I'm interested if you've come to this conclusion. You're very much on an island here. I haven't seen anyone else have him that high. Is he the type of guy? Remember when Bruce Irvin went like 16th or something, whatever it was, to the Seahawks in 2012, and nobody had Bruce Irvin? Will one team say this? Like, Will McDonald's skill set, undersized but crazy athletic, turns a corner extremely well, maybe the best in the class. It doesn't exist with a whole lot of players in this class. Will somebody love Will McDonald in the top 15?
I mean, we were talking the other day about how I think there are going to be a few weird first-round picks where you're like, whoa, where did that come from? Jonathan Mingo was the guy in Pete Traeger's mock. But I think there's going to be 3 or 4 of those guys where nobody really expects it to happen, and he ends up going away. It wouldn't shock me at all if Will McDonald was one of those guys. Like, yes, 239 pounds is not great. It's unideal in terms of size. Having said that, he's 6'4" with like 35-inch arms. Like, he's got the frame to be heavier than that. And if he was 249 or 255 or whatever, now you're talking like prototypical edge rusher size with that ability as well. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if a team drafted him in the middle of the first round.
Will McDonald, almost 35-inch arms too. He does have a different body type. He's really long, really shifty as far as the 3-cone and shuttle time.
Explosive as well.
Very explosive, all that stuff.
Here for it.
He's also 24.
Shut up.
If he's going to be 24 here on opening day.
Stupid age.
Just saying.
Don't care.
If I'm gonna use it against Tyree Wilson later on.
The dude later that's 25 and has no idea what he's doing.
All right, my number 2, which flips. It flips every day.
Oh, okay.
I'm going Miles Murphy.
Ooh.
From Clemson. Now, look, all these guys are different. You and I try to make a point. Receivers, they're different styles, different types, and cornerbacks, different types. Miles Murphy, he's your power rusher, right? He is incredibly strong. He moves people, solid production. I was just talking to Renner upstairs about some of these guys and where we're ranking them, and he said with Murphy, his question was like, man, he was so good as a freshman and he never really got better.
Yeah.
And then he said, well, that reminds me of Dexter Lawrence from Clemson.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, that reminds me of Trevor Lawrence from Clemson, right? They all kind of came in, they're stars right away, and then they just kind of remain stars, and maybe there's not massive improvement. Again, I think there's a big drop-off. As far like my confidence level in these players hitting, I'm extremely confident in Will Anderson.
Yeah.
I've now lost confidence in the rest of the class. It's a whole bunch of styles and types, and to me, you're chasing upside a little bit with all of these guys. And I'm saying that because all of the production profiles have to get better, right? These guys have to get better. Murphy's one of them. I just feel like he's one of the I hate overusing the word safe, but he's one of the guys I think that projects easier than some of the others.
I'm actually surprised that he hasn't had more kind of absurd buzz, because I agree with you 100%. You've got Will Anderson here, who is the best and the safest of these guys. After that, it's a lot like the wide receivers. It's like or the quarterbacks even. It's what are you scared of the least? Or what thing do you want to bet on the most is probably a better way of looking at it. Like with Nolan Smith, you got a tiny edge rusher, but insane athleticism and ability and those kinds of things. Myles Murphy, he's like the prototype. He's giant. He's got incredible athleticism. Like, he pops on tape. He's visibly way more explosive than a couple of these other guys. Like, he looks, when he gets it right, it looks like the Myles Garretts of the world. Like, it looks, oh, wow, how do you stop that? And then it just doesn't happen as much as you think it should. And it hasn't for like the last 4 years. So I kind of surprised that he hasn't had more of the Tyree Wilson, hype train going off on him. And maybe it's just because it wasn't, Tyree Wilson had the last year was his best year, which is an easy thing to get behind. Whereas Myles Murphy last year wasn't his best year. But I 100% buy into the idea that if you're going to bet on one of these dudes, that's the guy to bet on, because there's definitely a pathway for him to become like a top tier NFL edge rusher.
Murphy he ran a 4.57.
Yeah.
40. It may be a little bit better than that, actually. I've got some, I don't want to explain. I've got some skewed numbers in here. I have some pro day adjustments that I'm looking at here, so I can't remember if that was. It's probably even faster if I'm giving you some misinformation. But he actually worked out pretty well. But like I said, power type of rusher. I said he projects as kind of a Jason Pierre-Paul, Jadeveon Clowney type. And so what that is, he's not that type of athlete, either one of those guys necessarily, but those are guys who are always extremely good in the run game and were good, not great pass rushers. I do think that the run game matters as far as front seven run defense, especially as we play lighter boxes. That's why I also think a lot of my analysis might skew towards players who are like, you've got that foundation of pretty good against the run. I'm not just chasing pass rush upside or whatever. Like maybe you did with Will McDonald. Like Will McDonald could have, not that you chased it, Will McDonald has, on a per-play basis, and all these guys that are rumored to go in the first, like by far the best pass rush grade. Will McDonald.
Yeah.
The best. So I get it. So I'm going for more well-rounded players here, I would say. Whereas McDonald is a bit more of a projection in the run game.
Okay.
So we got different types.
Yeah. So the other thing, by the way, is that if you look at, we've talked about it before, but Arif Hassan's consensus board, that does have Myles Murphy at number 10 overall.
He's been everywhere, man. He's been all over the place.
I know. It feels generally like the buzz on him has been way lower than a lot of people. And he's been talked about as a guy that's falling, who could slip to the end of the first round, could even slip out of the first round. But he is still number 10 on the consensus board, which is way ahead of Lucas Van Ness, Nolan Smith, Will McDonald. Like, it's significantly higher than those guys. So, like, maybe he is actually seen in that light, and for some reason the attention isn't on it right now.
All right, so that's my 2. You got Will McDonald 2. I have Myles Murphy 2. Do you want to reveal where you have Murphy?
I have Murphy at number 4, but I have, so it's, if I'm doing the Chris Sims tiers, it's Will Anderson tier 1, and then I would have McDonald, Nolan Smith, who's my 3, Myles Murphy, probably Tyree Wilson as my 2nd tier. So that's my 2 through 5. So Nolan Smith.
So let's get your rankings back.
Nolan Smith, Georgia, Myles Murphy, Clemson, and Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech are the next 3 in my list. That's my top 5.
Wow, you're going just dropping everybody in here.
Well, I had already given those. So that was my next tier, I would say. And then Tyree Wilson, that's my tier 2.
All right, let's discuss. I also have, I believe, Nolan Smith 3.
Yep.
And Tyree Wilson 5.
Okay.
So, but I have a different 4.
Yeah.
So let's discuss Nolan Smith.
We flipped 2 and 4.
Yeah. Let's discuss. No, because I have McDonald 6. I have a different 4.
Okay.
Van Ness in there.
Gotcha.
So Nolan Smith is your 3 and my 3 in our rankings. Nolan Smith from Georgia.
Yeah. He's got some very it's very entertaining tape because he's tiny, really, really small. He's a little bit like a pinball sometimes where he just starts like bouncing around between players trying to hit him and block him, like careening off contact, but he keeps going and he fights and he, consistently bounces to the right place eventually.
Energizer Bunny type.
Yeah. He's got moves for a guy that size. Like he's got a really good kind of push-pull ability for offensive linemen who have a dramatically longer reach than he does. I think he's maybe less scheme diverse than a guy like Myles Murphy, but right now he's a better player. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like more teams, I think, are probably interested in a guy like Myles Murphy because he could play in anything, whereas right now Nolan Smith is the better player. Really, his only issue is the size and the sample size. Those two things. Like he's really small, and because Georgia rotates an absolute ton, he's hardly played. Like he hasn't been on the field that much.
Yeah, Nolan Smith, when I was watching him, I was like, hey, he uses whatever length he has really, really well, long arm, and so technically sound. He doesn't have long arms or anything like that. It's actually below average arm length and below average wings, actually about an average wingspan and all that stuff. He ran 4.39 at the combine just to add to it. So he's got one of the best 10-yard, the get-offs that we've seen over the last few years. All that's to complement a guy that's just been really productive. And again, I think for a guy that's like I've seen Nolan Smith set a hard edge in the running game far more than you've seen from, say, a Will McDonald, right? A guy that just hasn't he has to play a different role at Iowa State. So I think Nolan Smith can do all of your edge defender type of things. And I know we're well beyond the 4-3, 3-4 discussion.
Yep.
But it still kind of exists. There are still teams that have a five-man front basically as their base.
Yep.
And that's where Nolan Smith is going to be, he's going to fit in better with Pittsburgh or, the Bucs, the way they play, and they drop their edges into coverage a little bit more. Teams that do that are going to, like, there will be some teams that still think Nolan Smith is too undersized for their pure three-down defensive end role. So I don't know if that means he drops or if he just, if the right team is there. But I think he's just a really good, productive player who can get after the quarterback at a good, not great level and be good enough against the run.
Yeah, no, I like him a lot. I like him. I like this entire tier 2, I think, are good players. I just have – it's a case of which thing are you willing to bet on, which thing are you scared by. His size and relative lack of playing time is just concerning. It is.
Let me get into some numbers for you. I looked up historically PFF data back to 2006 for guys that are under 240 pounds. So this is relevant to your number 2 and 3 guys and my number 3 here for both Will McDonald and for Nolan Smith. This is where the concerns would come in. The best run defenders under 240 pounds since 2006. You have Andrew Van Ginkel from the Dolphins. You have Leonard Floyd, and Floyd's a completely different body type. He's just like a long, skinny, 240-pounder, but he plays the run really, really well with that body type. Similar body type that played well against the run. Manny Lawson is up there. There's not a lot after that, though.
Manny Lawson.
That's
a guy. That's a name. That's the Skywalker meme. That's a name I haven't heard.
He could be the Tyree Wilson comp.
He's a comp for a lot of guys in this draft.
Yes.
All of a sudden.
Manny Lawson, remember that this was, 2006 when his teammate
Mario
Williams goes number 1 overall. And I think NC State had, 4 defensive linemen all go in the first round? They had 3 or 4.
Yeah.
John McCargo, I think, went in there too. But Manny Lawson was the guy that's he's long, he's fast, and all projectable pass rusher. And he ended up being like a Sam hybrid linebacker, good,
but
solid player.
He was the classic guy where he's that tall, long, but undersized,
Barkevius Mingo type. Mingo, similar. He's on this list here. So there have not been a whole lot of undersized guys that are good against the run. There's only 2 guys with a PFF grade above 70 who are under 240 pounds. So now, as far as pass rushers go, best since 2006, you have Robert Mathis. We only caught some of his career. James Houston, just last year on 92 rushes. Chris Clemens, Hassan Reddick. Remember Antoine Barnes, really undersized, good pass rusher. Andrew Van Ginkel again. And then you have guys like Arden Key, Leonard Floyd, Manny Lawson again. Dennis the Barbarian Gardeck. You got him in there. But there's some good pass rushers in there. But so as much as I love Nolan Smith and I do like Will McDonald, they'd have to be on the outlier side here.
Yeah.
To have really good long NFL careers
Right.
in both facets of
And
play.
it's like you said yesterday, there's just outliers everywhere in this draft. And again, you don't need to go down the list very quickly before you hit them. Before you hit, like Will Anderson is your one guy that isn't the giant outlier. Everybody else is going to be an outlier essentially if they hit. Miles Murphy, maybe not so much, but like the other guys are going to be some form of outlier. It's again like wide receivers. There's not much in the way of guaranteed safety, and then immediately you hit outliers. Jordan Addison, if he becomes Isaac Bruce 2.0, it's going to be an outlier. Nobody else has done that since Isaac Bruce the first. It's kind of weird how this draft is just full of weird, unusual body types, speed, size, profiles, whatever.
Last year we saw Nick Benito. He was about 240, similar, we had run game concerns with him, but he was an elite pass rusher. 240 pounds, struggled as a rookie. All the data likes him, but, undersized and looks undersized.
Yeah.
I think Nolan Smith is better equipped to play as an undersized player because he's got that pop in his hands that reminds me of Von Miller sometimes and all that stuff. So there you go.
And he's got like insane athleticism. Like Benito was good, but
yeah,
he didn't
and
run
Nolan
4.4.
Smith is a crazy good athlete.
Yeah.
So your 4 is who again?
My 4 is Miles Murphy.
So you got Miles Murphy. So do you want to? We already talked about him. Do you want to add anything to Murphy?
No,
before I reveal my 4.
I think we hit him.
I'm going Lucas Van Ness as my 4. So my 3 is Nolan Smith. My 4 is Lucas Van Ness. And now we get into. I don't love it. I don't love any of them, but it's going to be. I'm going power rusher and the ability to move, and I think he could beat up on some guards with his power and play the run on the edge and all that stuff. Hasn't played a ton of football, but he's a good, solid player.
Yeah, I am lower on Lucas Van Ness than most people. I just don't see enough variety in what he does and how he wins. And I also think I'm not sure he's an edge rusher. Like he might be more of that interior style, the kind of old school 3-4 long power end, which is dying off. Like there aren't that many of those guys kicking around anymore. Most teams aren't using that as much as they used to. He's sort of, like the J.J. Watt style of player, but then J.J. Watt kicked all the way out. Like he's almost more of those old Steelers defensive ends, like Brett Kiesel, that type of player.
I think in today's NFL, though, okay, you could play some base end, right? If you put him up, the old 6 technique, Sam, when he's head up on a tight end, those tight ends don't have much of a shot against Lucas Van Ness and his power and his length and all that stuff. He also he's got good burst and all that. It's the natural, corner turning, and is he actually going to, win with agility around the corner against an offensive tackle? I don't know. But I'll get into this when we talk Tyree Wilson a little bit too. Different body types I do think makes sense to kind of like stock up on your defensive line. You've got a guy that you can move around, right? I think he will give guards some problems with his low pad level and his bull rush. And I think when you do line him up outside, it's not going to look like a Nolan Smith or a Will McDonald turning the edge, but he could be a power rusher on the edge, compress the pocket a little bit. So again, I like Van Ness enough. He's solid. He's good. I don't think he's a great prospect. He's my 4.
Yeah, I think he has a fairly high floor. Like the power and what he's good at, he's really good at it, and that does play. Like there's a space for that in the NFL. He's the guy of this group, and that's why he's out of this group for me, that I just don't think he has the ceiling that the other guys have. Like I can't really picture a world where he becomes the kind of player that the other guys at least have the capacity to become, I think, even if they never get there. Like, again, what are you betting on? I just don't think there's enough to bet on for Van Ness that I want to take him really high.
He's got the one of the lowest snap totals. He's played just over 1,000 snaps as a pass rusher and as a run defender, and played the run less than anybody else in this draft class. So he's inexperienced too, for whatever that's worth. If that's something that we can that he could build upon with more experience.
Yeah, and
how low do you have Van Ness?
Where have I got him? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7.
He's my Christian Gonzalez of the edge rusher group.
He's your guy. He's your one big outlier here.
I could be persuaded to bump him up a spot, but I wouldn't I wouldn't take him any higher than 6. In this
He's
list.
not Justin Smith? So when I was watching...
Well, he might be, but the problem with Justin Smith is, like, let's say for a second that's what he is. Let's say for a moment that he is the reincarnation, not that Justin Smith is dead, but Justin Smith 2.0, right?
Rest in peace.
In today's NFL, what is that? Because Justin Smith came into the league.
Nobody remembers who Justin Smith is.
Okay, old defensive end for the Bengals and then the 49ers, right? Yeah. And he started off as a sort of 4-3 power edge rusher and then moved to the 49ers, who ran this old school 3-4, and he became the defensive end 3-4. And before J.J. Watt rolled around, we thought that was about as good as a defensive lineman could play at that kind of position.
Early PFF days,
right.
He was the highest graded every single year.
And then Watt came along and just like blew that into the stratosphere and completely reset the bar of like how good a guy can play at that position. But my point being, if Justin Smith came into the league in this draft, what is he? Because that position doesn't exist anymore effectively.
Early down edge and then interior pass rusher, nickel. He's
right.
Playing 3 technique. He's playing 3
exactly.
technique,
So that's the thing.
basically.
He's been projected now. If Justin Smith comes into this draft, knowing what we knew about him as a player, we're talking about him in the Kalijah Kancey, Adebawore mold. Like that's what we think he is now. And does he have the same juice doing that as he did playing like traditional, head up over the tackle type of 3-4 end?
There were two. As I was, for those of you that were following along, I was tweeting through the 2001 NFL draft. I'm about halfway through the first round. We'll pick it up later on. Michael Vick draft and everything.
Gotcha.
Michael Vick, LaDainian Tomlinson.
I need the guy taking number 1.
Michael Vick
to set my.
Atlanta gave up the opportunity to get Vick. Chargers traded up. I also tweeted out last night the 6-year stretch that the Chargers had of just interesting storylines at quarterback. They drafted Ryan Leaf.
Yeah.
They had a chance at Michael Vick.
Yeah.
Passed on that. That same year, they drafted Drew Brees. And then a couple years later, they drafted Eli Manning, Chargers legend, traded him for Phillip Rivers, and then let Drew Brees leave. That's in a 6-year stretch. All of that happened for San Diego. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the 2 lessons that I thought were interesting in the 01 draft. Justin Smith, scouts were very concerned about his 32.5-inch arms. Very concerned. He still went number 4 overall and became a star.
Yeah.
And then Leonard Davis. The monster tackle from Texas who became a guard for the Cardinals.
Yeah.
One thing that sold scouts was the fact that he shut down Justin Smith
I love
in their
those
one-on-one
stories.
matchup.
I love them.
I'm just saying those are relevant because the arm length thing always comes up, but they're relevant too because next week all we're going to hear about is Darnell Wright shut down Will Anderson.
But
and that's going to be a positive for Darnell Wright and a negative for Will Anderson, and I don't think those 10 snaps actually matter in the grand scheme of things. Really.
Bryant McKinney made a career out of shutting down Dwight Freeney in college, right? When Syracuse played Miami in college, apparently Dwight Freeney was shut down by Bryant McKinney. I'll be honest, I've never watched that tape. But given the way that Bryant McKinney was absolutely victimized by Dwight Freeney anytime they played in the NFL, I'm going to assume he didn't. And actually what happened is Dwight Freeney was given like extra attention by tight ends or whatever the hell else happened in that game. But it was not Bryant McKinney one-on-one shutting down Dwight Freeney. And yet that was used as like, look at this dude. You can shut down Dwight Freeney.
Yeah, those things are fun. We'll have to go fire up some Syracuse Miami film.
Of course.
From what year would that have been? 01?
I think
01 to 02
like
Freeney draft. All right, so we both have Tyree Wilson at number 5. Is that correct?
Yep.
Tyree Wilson, who is projected to go in the top 10. Mm-hmm. Everyone else seems to have him as their 1 or 2, and we both have him at 5.
And I got to be honest.
Why are you being contrarian, Sam?
I was expecting to have him ranked lower than this. I told you what I did for sort of methodology of ranking these guys. So I specifically left Tyree Wilson to quite late in the process. I was effectively going through more or less in order of like a consensus board ranking and watching them in that kind of order, and then ordering them as I went. And I specifically left Tyree Wilson to later because I wanted to look at the bunch of guys that were in tier 2, tier 3, before I figured out where he was being slotted. Because I'm like, the only thing I'm really confident in right now is that Tyree Wilson belongs nowhere near Will Anderson. Like, they are dramatically different in terms of ability right now. So I was expecting to have Wilson ranked pretty low, but it didn't take long before I was like, okay, as much as I don't love him, he's better than this next guy, you know? And so I ended up slotting him at 5, and I'm like, I can't really put him lower than that, as much as I might not love. So The point being, you get pretty quickly in this draft to the point where I don't love taking an edge rusher. Like if I'm a team that needs an edge rusher and I'm sitting, say, low in the first round, and let's say Anderson, Nolan Smith, Miles Murphy, and in my case, Will McDonald are gone, I don't love it. Like I'm scared by Tyree Wilson, yet I might end up taking him just because I'm scared more of the other guys.
I think that's fair. I've gone back and watched Tyree Wilson multiple times on film just to make sure I'm getting the full picture here. He is definitely one of those guys where I get it on film. And again, was just talking to Renner upstairs. I said, like, I can like Tyree Wilson on film, especially his last season. Bend, dip, length, burst, tackle radius, love all that stuff. But he did it in his age 23 season. It was one breakout season that, to me, you don't have to take that in the top 10. That's my point that I think you're making as well. When I look at Tyree Wilson, I'm like, great. Here's still a project with tons of tools that I would take in the 20s. Maybe. I mean, if I was just stacking a vertical board, I'd put him in the 20s probably. Whereas, my theory, I've got data that just says I probably would just let someone else take that chance. And it might pay off for them, but I would let someone else take that chance. I can go through that data really quick in a minute, but there's things to like about Tyree Wilson. But much like Trayvon Walker last year, I think it's a very similar situation where depending on which years you look at, and I'm looking at all of them, the production profile does not match any other first rounder. Just doesn't.
Right.
And that's risky to me. And if you're just saying, like, the fact that his arms are 35 plus versus, someone else's 33-inch arms, like, that's not enough to say, oh, he's going from pick 25 to pick 8. That's not enough for me. And I feel like that's what the move is.
Yeah. He's been every time I watch his tape, he reminds me of somebody, and I can't really put my finger on who it is. This is not the player that he's reminding me of, but
Manny Lawson?
No. But he did remind me a little bit of like a lankier version of Ray Edwards. You remember him, the old Vikings defensive end?
Yeah, I don't remember Ray Edwards stylistically.
It's like I think he's going to win in the NFL. Like, I think he's going to get pressure and production. I'm just not sure he's going to win decisively. And like Ray Edwards was one of those guys. The Vikings had a few of these actually for a while where they had players that would get a lot of pressure, but not necessarily sacks. Ray Edwards was one. Brian Robinson was another for different reasons. I wonder if Wilson is going to end up being that guy. Like, I know actually his sack rate has been really good so far, but when you look at where he struggles, like you got power, he's got a lot of straight line bursts, like linear. He's going to power through some people. But it almost feels like the more space he's in, the worse he is.
Yeah.
And he seems to, like, there's definitely some change of direction ability sometimes. Like he's got a really good, so we use lateral agility, I think, gets termed as sort of one all-encompassing thing. You either have lateral agility or you don't, and it's a yes or no thing. But actually, I think there's two different ways of having that. Do you have that, like, hard lateral step, like foot in the ground, one step, essentially a cut? Can you cut in a short space laterally? Or can you run that arc? Can you turn tightly? Can you turn the corner tightly in that kind of bend? And I think he's good at the first one and bad at the second one. So there's some times where his turning circle looks like a barge. It's like, this is just not going to happen. But he's able to put a foot in the ground, just sidestep a guy pretty quickly. He's an interesting prospect, actually. I don't hate him, but he's very unusual. Like, this is not a normal profile.
There's so many yeah buts in there with this is good, yeah, but this is bad, yeah, but, right? And it goes both ways. I want to try to paint both sides of the story as quickly as possible. I looked through my numbers historically. Here are the first round prospects or guys that were drafted in the first round as edge defenders that were below, just say, the 55th percentile. I use that as an arbitrary cutoff because it got some interesting players in there. Here are the guys that are that low. Eric Armstead, who turned into quite the hit. Mm-hmm. And we only had 1 year of data on him, so a little asterisk next to that. Charles Harris was a miss by the Dolphins. Gregory Rousseau, and I think he's only low from a percentile standpoint because he opted out of his last year at Miami. Had he played, I think he would have been fine. But yeah, he's a miss by my model. He's become a very good player and a similar player to Tyree Wilson, super long and all that stuff, right? The other two are Joe Tryon-Shoyinka from the Bucs, and then Trayvon Walker last year for the Jags. So the hit rate's kind of hit or miss. If you want to say Eric Armstead and Gregory Rousseau, they hit. The other 5, Walker hasn't yet. Tryon Shoyinka has not yet. Charles Harris did not. So it's like, let's say it's 2 for 5, 40%. That's just one way of looking at it. But then when I look at where Tyree Wilson's actual percentile is like actually in the 20s, there's no comparable as far as guys at that production level other than Eric Armstead. The miss rate and for that level of player from a model standpoint in all rounds, the hit rate is like 7%. That's rough for me. On the other hand, again, how do you manipulate that? You can use data to tell whatever story you want. I trust this data the most because it's the most data. As you start to parse it down a little bit and you say, well, what if we just took last year for Tyree Wilson? Of course, things look a lot better. Is that what he is? He's a much better pass rusher. You could look at last year and say he was as good of a pass rusher as Will Anderson last year, or close. That's why people might have him ranked higher. The other thing is I looked at all of the players who did improve their pass rush production from college to the NFL. I mentioned this on the show yesterday. And it matches up intuitively. It is good athletes overall who improve, right? It is guys who have a good 40, a good 3-cone, a good shuttle, and usually some length to them. So does Tyree Wilson profile as an upside type of player? Yes. Yes, he does. But he also profiles as someone where the hit rate is so low that I think it's extremely risky in the first round. So for me, that puts him at 5 on my rankings. All of that stuff added up puts him at 5. I'm not being contrarian. I'm not being a hater and all that stuff. I just don't want to be the guy to take Tyree Wilson in the top 10 to 15 picks. I'd be much more comfortable taking him where we did in the mock draft the other day with the Jags. Grabbed him in the 20s.
Yeah, he's probably the first of the players in this sort of group where I would be very, very leery about drafting him. I'm reasonably confident about the next guys, and I think there's enough upside with Tyree Wilson, particularly relative to the guys that are following, that I'm willing to roll the dice. But the meshing of where I'm willing to roll the dice and where I think the NFL values him, or where he's sounding like he's going to get drafted, might mean that if I was a GM, it's not a natural crossover. I'm not going to be in the market for Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, that's
Unless
pretty
he
much.
Slips,
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel. I mean, I texted you yesterday. I said, "Is he just Charles Omenihu? What is Charles Omenihu? He's a guy that has not been great against the run, but when you throw him onto a defensive line like the 49ers last year, we have all these other pieces, and then it's like, oh, he could play. He could rush from the interior. He could rush from the edge, and it's just giving the offense a different look. This is a different body type. You have to. Drake Jackson's got burst, and Nick Bosa's just unbelievable. And oh, by the way, you get this super long, tough guy to block.
Yep.
I think Tyree Wilson's a good piece like that. I don't know if he's a future star. On top of all that, his breakout season did come at age 23. So that's what we saw last year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. We spent a lot of time on those guys because I think they needed it.
Yeah.
Who's your 6? Did you already reveal that?
So 6 I have is Felix Anudike-Uzomah, the Kansas State edge rusher.
Cool. He's my 7.
Cool.
So we're right in the similar boat here.
Yeah,
with
this
these
is quite
guys.
impressive, actually. Will McDonald is one big outlier relative to you. But
yeah, and
otherwise
McDonald's my 6.
Yeah, we have the same top 7 guys, right?
Same top 7. That's correct so far. So what'd you like about Anudike-Uzomah?
He has an obvious pass rushing plan. Like, you can see him work through a strategy. He almost treats it like a kind of problem-solving exercise where, he takes a shot at one thing first, see how that works, goes from that one thing to the next thing based off, failure or success. It's almost like those little flow charts, does this work? Yes, no, go to the next thing. Like, you can see him kind of work through. I think he has visibly less juice than a guy like McDonald. But he tested better than I expected from his tape. He was one of those guys where the numbers from his testing did not match up to what I was expecting to see based off just watching him. I think he's visibly less twitchy and explosive than some of these other guys, but he actually tested much better. So potentially has higher upside than I was giving him credit for. He might have the biggest variety of pass rush moves, the most ways to win of anybody in this class. I just don't think he's as good as some of these other guys.
Yeah, I wrote down about him. I don't love his speed to power. I don't think that's where he's going to win so much, unless I just didn't get to those reps. But Gumby, he's your Gumby guy. He's your Gumby guy in this class. He's the guy that's going to, bend and contort and just find a way to get past the blocker more than anyone else. So it's not winning, because you mentioned, hey, he doesn't look like he's got the pure burst or anything like that, like some of the other guys. But I think he's got that ability to slip off blocks and just get to the quarterback. That's good.
Yeah.
It's solid. We've seen him back into the first round. And if these other guys go, if there's a run, I could see that back into the first round.
He is solid. But I think that's critical. Is he's the first guy where you sort of look at and you go, yeah, I mean, he's solid. He's not great, but he's solid, And that
I mean, honestly, I started that at number 2. I started at 2. I said, they're solid.
But I think those guys are different in that they might be solid, but they have potential to be much better than that. I'm not sure I see the potential for Felix to be better than solid.
Yeah. I mean, for me, all these guys are just in a solid range. I'll say this. When I'm looking at model projections and all that stuff, anything over 90th percentile, the hit rate's through the roof. 70th, 80th percentile, it's all pretty much the same.
Specific to edge rushers.
Specific to edge rushers.
Okay.
70th and 80th percentile is all very much the same. And all of these guys, Miles Murphy, Lucas Van Ness, Nolan Smith, Will McDonald, and Odike Azama, all in a similar range, about 70th to 80th percentile, right in that same range. I think, so when people say this is a deep edge class, I think it is. But at the end of the day, just like you say, hey, 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 10, but we know historically only 2 are going to hit.
Yeah.
Edge defenders, it's like this top 7 that we have, 3 are going to hit. 3 or 4 are going to hit here, I think.
You can really see that in this class where it's like, there's a big block of these guys that I simply don't think even have the capacity to hit based off their skill set. So I found myself in this really weird world where obviously really liked Will Anderson. Then I had a tier of guys that I think I can buy this. I get it. I would take the bet on these guys, that tier 2 I have. And then there's a giant tranche of guys where I'm like, I don't love any of these dudes. They're okay. All of them are fine. And then we get past the guys, this field of people that I think are just okay. Then we get into these really interesting projects that I'm fascinated by and absolutely love. I'm like, I found myself just entirely unenthused by the people that are, reasonable size, reasonable athleticism, reasonable tool set, reasonable ability, reasonable tape. And I'm just like, this is just beige. This is just a giant swathe of beige. It's like, the way when people sell houses, they're all the same color. All the walls are that like off-white beigey thing because apparently that's like the most neutral, inoffensive, bland color you can think of. That's like edge rusher 7 through 10.
That's your edge rushers this year, huh?
Me. Yeah.
That's it. So we both have him as Felix is our 7.
Yeah.
All right, man. Who's your 8?
The first of the beige. Now, my exception to the field of beige that is here is my number 8, who is just endlessly fascinating to me. Number 8 is Keon White from Georgia Tech.
Also my number 8.
How have we done this? Keon White. So remember we had the whole conversation about what would happen if you drafted animals and put them on the football field?
Yeah.
That's Keon White. Keon White is what would happen if you took a bullfighting bull, right? Just slapped a helmet on him, painted red on the quarterback, gave him the red practice jersey, except for him it means go get him, and just let him go. Just this rampaging, giant human, 6'5", 285 pounds, with very little idea of what he's doing. But other than like, I must get to the quarterback, must get to him, must attack, and just like rampaging lunatic along the defensive line. It's hilarious.
I love it. You paint a beautiful picture.
I love this dude's
always.
tape. I went, how many snaps did I tell you I got through before he was like on the ground, on his feet at the end of the play?
10 snaps.
It was like 8 consecutive snaps he was on the turf.
It's a little reckless.
Incredibly reckless.
It's a little reckless. But just like Van Ness and Murphy, power rusher. Power.
Yes, sort of. But it's like continuing the red rag to a bull theme. Like, the way like a rodeo clown can run in front of a bull and just take him completely away from the thing he's supposed to hit. Like, this guy is so sort of zeroed in on the red flag thing. Like, must get to the quarterback, must get, that like a running back just can wander over and cut block him to the knee and take him out of the play without even, like, you won't even notice it's coming. He's incredibly reckless, so laser focused on must get to quarterback that like misses really simple, obvious things that are coming to take him out of the play.
So he's also 24, right? Because we've got COVID is sending all sorts of middle-aged men to the NFL, basically. So we've got 24-year-olds, Keon White and Will McDonald, 23-year-old Tyree Wilson. That's one thing. Secondly, played tight end at Old Dominion in 2018. Actual defensive end snaps, actually, he's got fewer defensive end snaps, I think, than who did I say? Than Van Ness. Or it's in a similar range. But Keon White's up there in pass rush win rate, also a very good, solid run defense grade. There's a lot to like about him. He's been invited to the draft.
Yeah.
So is he going to go in the first round, Keon White? He's our 8th edge defender right here. Once again, will someone else have him in the top 4 or top 5? Maybe. I mean, it's going to be a bunch of which type do you like and what are you buying into and what are you projecting him as?
Yeah.
But he's got about 1,300 or so defensive end snaps. That's not a ton. That's not a lot of experience. Missed most of 2021 with injury and everything. So he's a bit of a projection, but there's some tools and some,
And I will
polar bear
say,
bull to work with.
Yeah, I will say as the year wore on, he had more of a clue of what he was doing. Like you could see development throughout the year, which I think is probably important for a guy that's that raw and manic and clearly absent of sort of real polish. If you can at least see it developing as you go on, I was quite encouraged by seeing that in Kadarius Toney's tape. Like he was talked about as being this like complete and total project and just an athlete on the field. But I think as his tape went on, you could see sophistication developing in Kadarius Toney throughout a very small sample size of playing a position. I think you can see that in Keon White as well. So, okay, the age thing is not working in your favor, but we are talking about a relatively inexperienced raw player who has shown already in a small sample size the ability to improve and get better and develop like the things he will need to work on at the NFL level. So just a hilarious prospect, but one that I don't hate. Like I can absolutely be sold on Keon White.
By the way, there's a comment in the chat asking why we hate Aid Adebaware. That's a different question, but we have not classified him as an edge for this ranking.
Neither one of us.
We'd call him a tweener, so we did not put him in this ranking. Had we put him in the ranking, he probably maybe sneaks into the top 10.
I don't even think he's a tweener. I think he's just an interior
defensive lineman that maybe moves around.
And
So we did not classify him as an edge for this.
There are a few players in this draft who have that weird. Are they interior? Are they edge rushers? Do they fit somewhere in the middle? There's a guy later on, one of my sleepers, I have as the reverse of that. I think he will end up inside, and I think he's actually an edge rusher. Adebaware, I think, though, is an interior rusher. He's a super undersized one, but that's what he is. I know he played edge rusher in college, but it was kind of like
Senior Bowl. He was more in the interior. That's where they're really going to try
That's just what
him.
he's supposed to be. Like he was just out of position at the college level.
Adebaware definitely fits the I want my heart saying yes, my data saying no.
Right.
Love watching him play and the whole deal. One more thing on Keon White. You mentioned he's on the ground a lot and everything. Just general contact balance I don't think is great for White and some others in this class. There is a lot of guys who are good at destroying blocks, but I don't feel great about them finishing plays. Those guys are tough sometimes because I think there's value in destroying blocks, right? And forcing cuts in the run game and disrupting in the pass game. But you might not get as much finish from those guys. But Keon White's hands, and he's such a strong striker. Like when he strikes, he's going to win. If he doesn't strike, he's getting locked up, that type of thing.
I don't think it's a balance thing for Keon White, though. I think it's just he's so manic, out of control, and it's an awareness problem. Like it's a lack of understanding where the punch is about to come. Like, if you're automatically off balance and not expecting a hit, the slightest touch can knock you off your feet. You know what I mean? He just has that the whole time, where he's so laser focused on like just must get to the quarterback that like a dude coming in from the side and just like popping him sends him sprawling to the ground. Like he just doesn't see the hits coming in a way that he needs to.
There's somebody in the chat may have your sleeper. So Keon White is both of our 8. I might go off the rails here for the next couple. So he's my 8.
Off the rails.
Who's your number 9 here?
My number 9 is Tuli Tuipolatu.
Forget it.
USC.
We're both the same. We both have the same 9.
How is that possible?
Here's why it's possible. You and I both know that the data matters for edge defenders. With corners, it's all. I've mentioned what types of players do you want here, but for corners, it matters so much more, type and style, and what your eyes tell you. An edge, you can rely on the data, and your hit rate's going to go through the roof. And we both have the same data that we're looking at. Thule is a good, solid player, but a weird one as well.
Yeah, and it's not that because I didn't rely on the data that much.
Oh, well, there you go. That was my answer.
Yeah, I don't know how we've done that. This is firmly in my just a guy tranche of beige players. Like, he's fine. He's workmanlike. Workmanlike was a note I wrote for him. Just keeps plugging away. Wins late a lot on the down.
Yeah.
Can play pretty much anywhere along the front. He's got some power. He's reasonably technically sound. He just doesn't excite.
He weighed in at 266 at the combine. He's young too. He's 20. Other end of this spectrum here, assuming my birthdays are correct. So he's 266. He was listed at 290 at USC, and he did play a bit of a hybrid role. He did line up quite a bit on the interior, more on the interior than, say, some of the other guys that we mentioned. But he could also win on the edge with some quicks and everything. He's got a little shake and bake to him and everything. So I didn't know. I don't know if he ever reached 290 or if USC was just like, oh, yeah, he's an interior player for us for the most part, just jack up his weight. But 266 seems like a reasonable playing weight, but he's not this dynamic edge rusher or anything either at that weight. So, he's a solid prospect. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about this group in the middle.
Me neither, and that's fine. Let's just go through the rankings and to me, there's going to be some notable names missing from my list.
Okay.
And your list too, because we've only got one left. So who's
Really?
So I got.
When was that?
We're doing top 10, right?
That was 8?
That was
or
9.
That was 9. Okay. Gotcha.
There's one left to get to 10.
Okay. Yeah.
So Thule's my 9 as well.
Yep.
Who's your 10?
BJ Ojulari from LSU.
From LSU.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just tremendous.
He did not make my list.
Tremendously beige player.
Yeah.
Like,
he did not make my list. I did not like BJ Ojulari.
He's the classic just a guy.
He's young in football too. Like, that's the thing you got going for him. He hasn't played a ton of football either, so could get better.
Yeah.
My 10, I'm going a little bit different here, I think. Going Zach Harrison.
Oh.
From Ohio State.
Okay.
Former 5-star. Got to get the former 5-star.
It's just
with
taking
the crazy 36-inch arms. I love the arm length, man.
I like it.
I love the dark green in my conditional formatting when I look at his arm length.
Oh.
No, but I think Harrison's a good player. A good solid player. Do you have anything else on Ojulari, and then I'll talk Harrison?
No, like the bottom end of my top 10 is a bunch of guys. Like, they're firmly in my beige group. It's a little bit like wide receiver. That I love the next group a lot more, where it's like, hey, these are fascinating projects for one reason or another. Like, they've got something amazing about them, like a glaring red flag. I just find it way easier to buy into that than a guy who's just like just okay across the board. But it's like, can that become anything at the NFL level? Probably not.
Yeah. I'll talk about – well, I didn't love Ojulari. I know he's been – everybody's had this back end of the first round rumor at some point, I think, if you're an edge defender. Ojulari's had it as well. I didn't love him. I don't think he didn't win enough.
Yeah.
I have a note. Who did he get shut down by? He got shut down. Oh, so when he went up against – I had this note from last year. Charles Cross, the number 9 overall pick from Mississippi State. Charles Cross shut down DeMarvin Leal, Sam Williams last year. I have some of their matchup notes. BJ Ojulari went head-to-head with Charles Cross 55 times over last season and just did not win. Did not win. He won twice. So I had that note on Ojulari. Just doesn't have 38th percentile pass rush grade, 37th percentile run defense grade. I think Ojulari is just a massive projection, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in the world of needing edge rusher help or defensive line help, I would be interested in my first group. This whole group of beige, though, I don't think I draft those guys. I just don't see the projection.
Take him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round.
No, I think I'd rather wait to the 4th, 5th, 6th round and take the guys I think that are like projects but have something to work with, like some upside. I just don't see the upside in this middle group where it's like, what is the purpose of drafting them? Like, is there any benefit to drafting a guy with this like ceiling of...
Why does Ojulari not have the same upside as, say, your deep sleeper that's going to show up in the 6th?
because I don't think he has the tools that those guys have. Like, either those guys have incredible pass rushing sort of suite, but are missing size, right? Like they weigh 230 something. And you're like, well, maybe he can put on some weight and we can work with that tool set, and there's something there. Or they have like freaky tools and need to be worked on in terms of, finding a pass rush plan, like actually developing some technique to this rather than just relying on crazy athleticism.
Before the people in the chat go crazy when they say, "Oh, you wouldn't draft him at all," that's just, there's nuance to that. You're saying it the same way I'm saying, which is like you only get 7 players or 10 players to pick, and you're not just gonna, like, BJ Ojulari might be 130th on your vertical board, but there's certain players you just don't care to come out of the draft with.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, right?
It's
Like I just wouldn't want to take them where they're projected to go. Therefore, I'm going to look at other players at that position to get later or whatever it might be.
I also just don't think that they have the upside to be worth the selection. Like, it's not that I don't think other people would. Like, there are people out there that will value, like, the quote-unquote certainty of, like, an average prospect, I'm not one of those people. If I want an impact contributor, I'm going to take him in day 1 somewhere, day 2 maybe, like the high-end guys. And then once I get to these people that I just don't think have that upside, then I'm just chasing projects. Like, at that point, my entire day 3, if I was a GM, would be drafting people that have something glaring missing from their game. But the thing that they do have, if you can give them the piece to put that back together, it actually makes them like a really valuable player. Like, I would be drafting wild projects of various descriptions in day 3. I would not be drafting the guys that like are reasonable at everything.
You probably need guys who are reasonable at everything, but But
that's like, can't you just get those in free agency? Like there's BJ Ojulari sitting out there right now doing nothing. The guys that are in the second contract have already shown that they're not really very good, but can play like 300 snaps and just take up space for you. I can get them later. I can get them in June, to fill out a camp spot. Like, I just don't need them.
Wow.
Zach Harrison. That's harsh to BJ. Like, the guy might be better than I think he is, but like that's my read on him right now.
Yeah, and I mean that's your read on a whole bunch of other guys that are.
Yeah, him and a bunch of guys that people have in this kind of range, like Isaiah Foskey, the Notre Dame edge rusher. There's a whole bunch of people.
There's a whole bunch of guys that just missed. Who again, Foskey's gotten first round hype at one point. Andre Carter from Army has had first round hype. I'm interested in your thoughts on Derek Hall if you have any. Zach Harrison's going to be my 10. If you want to just finish my rankings up on the board there. Mm-hmm. Harrison, not to get into the arm length thing again, but like I made the note, when you watch him play, he just looks long and difficult to block, right? So that's the same thing that's getting Tyree Wilson selected in the first round. Now, Tyree Wilson's probably a much better athlete than Zach Harrison, who just doesn't, move laterally at all. But when we talk about adding to my defensive line with different difficult to block body types, I think Zach Harrison has that. I think he can move interior, play on the edge really well against the run. Straight line burst is actually pretty good. So I like Harrison as a former 5-star, bit of a project who, he's going to be a William Golston type, play a bunch of snaps, and exactly what you just described, that BJ Ojulari, he's going to play 400, 500, 600 snaps and maybe do it at a higher level than some of the others that you can get on the free agent wire and all that stuff. So I like Zach Harrison as a guy I just want on my team. The guys that just missed for me was Ojulari, Isaiah Foskey.
Yeah.
Right. I get it, but there's just a whole lot of nothing on his tape as far as rushing the passer.
I have a bunch of people who literally got the note, just a guy, and then I went just a guy 1.0, just a guy 2.0, just a guy 3.0. I have quite a few of just the guys in this range.
Where did you have Derek Hall? Because he seems like the guy, and even Andre Carter, both profile as guys that are not good in the run game, but could be really good pass rushers.
17 for Derek Hall. I didn't like him as much as some of these other guys. He felt like a guy.
Auburn, by the way. Auburn, Derek Hall. We got to do better at identifying players here.
He struck me as a guy. He was actually my like watershed for a lot of these prospects. Like if he was better or worse than Derek Hall. Derek Hall felt like a guy who only wants to win with power. Like just doesn't have an awful lot else in the tool chest. Wants to win with power every time. Not a lot of lateral to his move, a lot of straight ahead, linear
Those
play.
My same notes on Zach Harrison. He kind of played
Yeah.
like Marcus Davenport in college, just to run through people.
Yeah, and I didn't think he has the length to really struggle or really trouble like offensive tackles with his long arm. I didn't love Derek Hall's prospect. So the chat was asking this. I think this is a reasonable point. I kind of crapped on the beige group and then talked up some of the other toolsy guys that I'm more interested in. So let me sort of run through a few guys. The just a guy people. Ojulari we talked about. Foskey was in that group.
Do you remember the schools? Do you have their schools?
Foskey from Notre Dame. Derek Hall from Auburn was in that group. That's the sort of the bulk of the just the guys in this group. The Nick Herbig is a different category.
I would have put him in my top 8 or 10, to be honest. I love Nick Herbig.
Okay.
Love him.
So he was one after Ojulari for me. So he's number 11.
I don't think he's really an edge. I think he might be the best linebacker in the draft. Nick Herbig from Wisconsin.
The best off the ball linebacker.
He might be the best linebacker in the draft.
So
not the same school scout, but Joe Schobert, edge to linebacker from Wisconsin. Zach Bond, edge to linebacker from Wisconsin. Nick Herbig can play in coverage. He can play in space. And he can rush the passer. He's just awesome at football. I want Nick Herbig on my team.
I do think that his biggest concern might be that he just doesn't get the chance to show that he can play edge. I also found him very weirdly one-sided. Like every now and again you get a player that's way better rushing off one side than the other. Herbig is really good rushing off the left side of the line and not as good rushing off the right side of the line. He seems to be able to he can swipe and get round and turn the corner from the left and not really from the right. And he just doesn't seem to try from the right. I don't know if he just doesn't have that. For some reason, he doesn't seem to do that from the other side. So kind of unusual in that. But I did like him. I thought he was quite good. I thought Lonnie Phelps was interesting.
Kansas.
He was Kansas this year. Where was he before? The year before Miami from Ohio. Miami of Ohio, and then Kansas. He reminded me of somebody, and I couldn't think who it was. He has this weird, like, dead straight back upright thing, and like so when he goes down to the 4-point stance, it's like arched back, like hand in the turf. It's weird kind of look to him. I was wondering, like, is it just like really short legs and a long torso? We've had that conversation before, but he's got some moves. He's got some like real strength to him. Like, again, endless motor. When he gets it right, it's really good. I quite liked his tool set. I really liked Nick Hampton from Appalachian State.
He's one of my sleepers.
Yeah, did I have him on my sleepers list, or did I just name him? I forgot who my sleepers were.
Undersized, but
he's one of my sleepers. Okay,
yeah.
So I really liked. We'll come back to him because he's on that. I kind of liked Byron Young, the Tennessee edge rusher. Really weird prospect. He has no clue what he's doing. Zero moves. None. Is insanely though athletic and twitchy and explosive and actually springy on a lateral. Like he has that movement ability laterally where it kind of looks fake. He's able to like weirdly spring without gathering himself, just move laterally in a way that looks like the video.
Morphing in Madden.
It looks like the video has been edited. It's like this is not how a human moves, but just has no moves, no clue what he's doing. Almost everything in terms of winning is just like running through a dude, winning with athleticism, a lot of inside stunts. The best move he has is that kind of ghost move off the edge, and again, seemed to be quite one-sided. But he's got an interesting story because he hasn't played a lot of football at all, but he's 25. So what do you do with that? He took time off in high school, like working a real job.
Tennessee legitimately had just a whole bunch of middle-aged men on the field last year.
Yeah. Took time off in high school, like worked a real job, went the JUCO route, has basically 1,100 snaps at Tennessee, ran a 4.4 40, 1.6 10, 38-inch vertical, 11-foot broad, like explosive as hell. So again, like if you're like, what do I want to bet on in the low rounds? Dude, give me that athlete and if I have a good defensive line coach, give that guy a year of like individual tutoring and see what we can create from that, because the freaking, like the clay is there. That tool set is insane. Who else did I like? I liked Andre Carter, right? We talked about this before with Mike, the Army defensive end. He's got a lot of ability, but he's like preposterously thin and lanky and 230-something pounds at like 6'6", because he was at Army, where you have to like run miles with a pack in your back and you can't weigh 280 pounds or whatever. Like, he's got the frame to be.
What did he officially? I'm seeing him in the 250s. Did he weigh in lower than that?
I thought it was like 230 something.
His workout numbers were not good.
Except the 3-cone, right? Didn't he have an absurdly good 3-cone time?
3-cone 711, unless that's adjusted from pro day or whatever. But it was pretty good. But he was below average vertical, broad, 40.
There was one number that he got
10.
really good at.
Cone was his best time.
Okay. So I think it was the 3-cone that's good. But he feels like a guy that he's going to pack on like 30-plus pounds of muscle and be a very different player than he was in college, which was good. Like, he actually has some pass rushing skills and some tools. But he's the classic total project, because you basically have to budget in like a total redshirt year. Like, year one, he can't play because he's way too lightweight. Literally cannot play. And that means you have to basically burn a roster spot on him, because he probably can't survive in your practice squad. Someone will try and claim him. So you have to burn a roster spot for him for a year before you get anything out of him. Then year two is figuring out, once you've packed on 30 pounds of muscle, now can he play? So it's the fascinating sort of project element of him.
Yeah, he didn't make a ton of plays. He did struggle in the run game. Did not make a ton of plays in the run game whatsoever. Last year, Carter had an excellent pass rush grade. Got a lot more attention this year. Looks so much bigger than everybody on the field, too, in Army games. Just taller.
He's so long
than everybody.
He's a lot like B.J. Thompson from, where the hell was he from?
Stephen F. Austin?
Yes.
You got all the way to B.J. Thompson?
I did. So he's another guy, a lot like Andre Carter, where he was like farcically body shaped, like 6'6", 240. Again, he's just taken a visit, I think, to the Bengals recently. Somewhere, again, explosive. He had really good pro day numbers: 4.6 40, 7.06 3-cone. But another guy that you're talking about, like, needs to add 20 pounds minimum of muscle size, anything, to be able to play at this next level. And the level of competition he went up against was just disgusting. But again, like, what are the tools we're working with? I really like what he could bring to the table.
Yeah, that's a good late-round flyer type, for sure.
Sure. Not one of my sleepers.
So we had to explain a lot. I mean, there's a lot of players who are names. We're seeing guys like DJ Johnson from Oregon getting hype, and there's a lot of names in this class.
There's a lot of edge rushers.
What do you have for sleepers?
Okay, so my sleepers, I already mentioned one of them. Appalachian State.
Also one of my sleepers.
Oh, there you go.
Nick Hampton.
Dude, how do we get the same freaking list for all of this stuff?
That's pure grades. I'm model guy, Nick Hampton.
Model guy? I didn't know he was a model guy. See?
Carl Brooks, I see.
Yeah. Carl Brooks is my other one. So he's my guy. Carl Brooks, I have a great comp for him. You're going to love it. Carl Brooks is 300 pounds playing on the edge, right? So he's going to be a defensive tackle at the next level. I think that's a mistake. I don't think he's a defensive tackle.
It's a 300-pound edge.
He is. You know who my comp for him is?
Who?
Charles Grant. Remember the defensive end from the New Orleans Saints?
Georgia?
I don't know where he played in college. But Charles Grant was a 290-pound, 4'3" defensive end, and it wasn't great weight. You know? He had some junk to him. And I think that's Carl Brooks. I think Carl Brooks, so he's not good inside. Like, he doesn't, the less space he has to work with, the worse he is. And the more space he has to work with, despite being 300 pounds, he's actually good in space. He has a variety of ways to win on the edge. He can also adjust and move around on the fly, despite being 300 pounds somehow. I think he's a legitimate edge rusher who somehow is 300 pounds.
Look, Carl Brooks was one of my first model identifiers. The data loves him. I mean, you don't have to go crazy. The PFF grades are excellent.
Okay.
Production's off the charts for Carl Brooks. Had one of the worst workouts of this entire cycle, if not the worst. I mean, if you want to compare him to edge, let's compare him to edges.
Yeah, let's do that.
Quick. His percentile rank against edges: arm length 11th percentile.
That's not great.
40-yard dash 5.08, 6th percentile.
Yeah.
10-yard split 177, 7th percentile. Bench press 28. 89th percentile.
Now
Nailed
we're talking.
it. Everything else. Vertical, 3rd percentile. Broad, 7th. 20-yard shuttle, 1st percentile at 5 flat. And then the 3-cone was 7.63, 13th percentile. He was the guy. If he just had dead smack average workout for an interior defensive lineman. He wasn't even there for that. Just a dead smack average workout for that. I'm thinking, yeah, this guy, absolutely. So I know the tape matters and the production matters. So that's the type of guy you take a late round flyer on. But yeah, I moved him to my DI group.
Oh yeah, those are so
But the
rough.
production profile is out of this world.
Those are some rough numbers.
Where's Brooks? Sorry, in my interior defensive line profile here, where would he be? 90 something. Here he is. Yeah, he's still low. Yeah, one of the worst combines, even for an interior defensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to hang your hat on there, but I love his tape. I want him on my football team, and I think he's an edge rusher, weirdly.
Yeah, I could buy into it. Very, very productive player. Let me get to my sleepers. It's a whole lot of pass rush upside type of guys. Yasir Abdullah from Louisville.
Okay.
Jose Ramirez from Eastern Michigan.
I need to look at him again. I liked his tape, but I was also watching it in the fog of like apathy at the end of a giant session. I'm like, I know I'm not giving him fair credit at this point.
Every time you throw in the Eastern Michigan film and they're at home, do you have to
hate it?
People don't know. I mean,
They play in
their
a gray
field
field.
is gray.
Yes.
It literally looks like you're watching something from the 50s.
No,
before
what
they had
it looks
color.
like is you see those things where people selectively color something, you know, where the picture is like grayed out, but something is picked out in color.
They've grayed out the field.
Right. So it looks like everything is grayed out except the guys in uniform, particularly when they're playing somebody, you know, with weird colors or whatever. It's bizarre. It's like it looks like your screen is broken.
I also threw Nick Hampton, who you said, these are all we're giving it away. These are all model guys. Abdullah, another guy that just incredible athlete. He's kind of like a combine projection type of guy out of Louisville. Also a little bit older. Hampton's production's off the charts, even though he's undersized. Ramirez, I don't know if he can handle the run game at all. I just kind of want him as a pass rush project. And then I added Viliami Fehoko from San Jose State. Mm-hmm. He's still he probably has to be an edge as far as this group goes. I love his snaps actually lined up over guard, where he's rushing as a 3 technique, and I think he could be a move type of guy on the defensive line who's been incredibly productive as well. Even though Pete Prisco's takes are all over the place, Pete had him on his Better Than team. Always a fun read there. But Fehoko is another guy. Workout was terrible, horrendous.
Yeah.
But extremely productive. It's 6'4", 276.
Just looking at Charles Grant's measurables, and
are they similar?
No, they were good. Well, not good. They were significantly better than Carl's Brooks, except 3-cone, which was wretched. Charles Grant had a
How'd you come up with that?
7.69 3-cone time, which is 10th. It's awful. It's bad. So that part makes sense. It's just if Carl Brooks could only be slightly better at everything else athletically, he'd be a perfect Charles Grant comp. Tragically, though, again, like the Justin Smith thing, does that exist in today's NFL? I'm not sure you can be a 290-pound 4.3 defensive end anymore. I don't think it flies.
No, probably not.
Let's talk about Nick Hampton, though, because I didn't know he was a model guy. He was one of my favorite players in this late group.
Yeah, my whole if this thing doesn't explode here.
He 100% looks the part as a legitimate pass rusher, but is, again, freakishly lightweight. He's 236 pounds, and I don't know that he has the frame to be bigger than that. Like, he's not like Andre Carter or that other guy whose name B.J. Thompson, where it's like, okay, they're really lightweight, but they obviously have the frame to be 20, 30 pounds heavier than that. Like, Nick Hampton is the same kind of weight and doesn't have that frame. So you're like, well, how much bigger can he get?
I want to talk to Houston guys for a minute because they're like the weirdest. But in this draft class, if I look at pass rush grade, I won't tell you the exact number, but it just say raw pass rush grade above a certain threshold before it gets converted to 0 to 100. Okay? Mm-hmm. The best guys in the class, not in order, but above this threshold of really, really good. Will McDonald from Iowa State. Andre Carter from Army. Nick Herbig from Wisconsin. Jose Ramirez, Eastern Michigan. Lonnie Phelps from Kansas, your guy there. And then the 2 Houston guys. Oh, where's and Hampton's right there. Sorry, and Hampton's as well. Nick Hampton from Appalachian State, and then the two Houston guys, Derek Parrish and DeAnthony Jones. They don't even make sense, but Nick Hampton is up there from a pass rush standpoint, worked out pretty well. He is a little undersized. He feels undersized.
He is.
When you're watching. He is undersized.
That's his only problem, though. Like, everything else is good. He gets around the corner really well. He can convert speed to power. He's got really good hands. I think he's absolutely legit outside of size, which does show up sometimes. Like, when he loses, it's because he's not got enough bulk behind him. A couple other points I would make about him. Number one, he drew quite a lot of extra attention. Like, relative to these other guys, there's running backs and tight ends on him the whole time, in addition to offensive tackles, like on a play. He might have seen the most extra attention of any of these edge rushers I looked at when I was going through stuff. The other thing is, I really want to see him with his hand in the dirt more. Like, he played essentially a stand-up outside linebacker spot at Appalachian State. And I think he wants, like, you didn't see the 4.6 40, the 1.6 something get off. You didn't see that coil because he didn't have the starting point. You know, he didn't have the hand to the ground to be able to burst off the line. I would love to see him play more as a wide nine, you know, even if it's a situational role in the NFL, which is going to have to be 236. But just give him his hand in the dirt and let him use speed and explosiveness.
Every year I just fall in love with the undersized, productive edge rushers.
But he's the only one this year that I love, despite, like, I don't know that he can get bigger than that. Like, Andre Carter, B.J. Thompson, they have to get bigger than that. They can't play at 6'6", 230 something. They're going to have to be 250 plus, and they have the frame for it. Hampton
get him in there and try to, see what they can do.
Yeah, like, Hampton is 6'2". He doesn't have that frame. He's not lanky, big, long. He's going to have to play at like 240 and make it work somehow. So
based off my latest consensus board rankings, if you look at the Horry board here.
You have a legitimate clipboard.
Yeah, I got a clipboard. I'm gonna have my Horry board updated and laminated.
This is the most old school thing I've ever seen.
Here's what I would do. I'm calling plays. Just gonna call plays.
It's particularly good because you've left the label on it. They don't do that in the NFL. Somebody takes it off for them.
Oh yeah?
Clipboard.
There's a label. Oh yeah, there's a label.
Yeah.
Got it at Staples.
Uh-huh.
Probably for $1. I would look at Nick Herbig in the 4th.
Oh,
right?
You've
So,
got
like,
rounds on him.
Where would I grab these guys? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Where would I take some of these guys? Nick Herbig in the 4th, where they're just basically where they're projected. Nick Hampton, consensus board, right around the 6th, absolutely. And then Jose Ramirez, Yasir Abdullah, Lonnie Phelps from Kansas, your guy, in the 7th.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, if all those guys are available, that's where they're kind of projected to go. Thomas Incoom from Central Michigan, I didn't mention him. He could be a good. There are, and this is basically what you're saying, right? You found these guys in rounds 3 through 5, who it's like, or maybe even a little bit higher. It's like I just don't feel great about them there. But I'm seeing guys in rounds 6 and 7 where there's something to work with, and that's way more intriguing than some of the mid-tier options.
Yes, 100%. Like, if your choice is, do you take a B.J. Ojulari in the 2nd or the 3rd round, or even the 4th, or do you roll the dice on a guy like Nick Hampton late in the draft, 6th or 7th, or even Lonnie Phelps, 6th or 7th? Give me the latter two, like 100%. Beautiful. I just think that's a better bet to make, right? I mean, that's what we're doing.
That's what we're trying to do.
It's which is the better bet.
And that's what I'm, when I'm trying to reimagine the draft here, I'm trying to say which round would I take these guys? Every team does this to a point, right? Here are the guys I'm targeting in these rounds.
It's effectively what the entire conversation is. I mean, that's what we're doing here. Did you have thoughts on Yaya Diaby from Louisville?
Yes. So okay production.
Yeah.
Good size and all that stuff. Okay production, but he's one of those, has the profile to improve. We'll say that. So okay production. Model really likes him as a good prospect.
So
he's probably my best 4th round option. With Nick Herbig.
So I wrote down that he is the guy, if you're looking, and this happens every draft, if you're looking for the dude that didn't have tremendously good tape, but has like a Donnell Hunter athletic profile, and you're like, who's the next Donnell Hunter? You know, the guy that you take who doesn't have the college production or tape or whatever to back it up, but like has the athletic profile and the physical tools to be a high-end player at the next level. That's him.
Yep.
Like, he's the dude. because I didn't see much at all from his tape. Like didn't see the athleticism for a start. Didn't see the juice. I kind of wondered, like, even if he was better as an inside guy, like he works best from interior alignments or from those head up over the tackle type of situations. Maybe he was a player sort of outside of his era. Again, like the Justin Smith kind of conversation. Would he be better in that old school 3-4 defensive end kind of world that doesn't really exist anymore? But with that testing, I don't love that for him because I just didn't see enough on tape. But somebody's going to like that as a gamble to take. And I get it.
I hinted at this earlier. Let me just try to explain it really quick. I isolated all of the players historically who have improved the most at the NFL level. So I'm trying to rethink upside here, Sam, and either confirm priors or rethink it, right?
Yeah.
Let's confirm, like you can confirm priors that the players who improved the most at edge were the better athletes. So I looked at the guys that improved the most and the guys who regressed the most from college to the NFL as far as, production-wise. And the guys that improved the most had far better we have our own combine scores here at PFF. Their combine scores were through the roof better than the guys that didn't improve. They had 3 cones that were 0.3 of a second better than guys that didn't improve. The shuttles were a little bit better. 40 time was about, 0.1 of a second faster. So arm length was a little bit longer, all of that stuff. So at this particular position at edge, my point, I think my point is with Yaya Diaby, he hits all those thresholds of can improve. And there's other players where I think you want to weigh production too, but if you're looking for upside guys who are going to improve their production, you can draft athletes above a certain profile. Yaya Diaby, I think, is one of those guys.
Yeah,
I think it's just an interesting way of using data to figure out where do you spend your day 3 picks.
Those are
because that is one of the biggest debates in draft rooms as well.
Yeah, I think those are good gambles to take. Like the day 3 picks to me are you're either going to take these guys with very limited upside and are just sort of meh across the board. To me, it's like what is your favorite gamble? And I probably would split my gambles between athletic freaks that don't necessarily have the tape and guys that have insane tape but don't necessarily fit the athletic profiles. And I hope that you hit on some combination of the two.
Model guys. You take model guys and model athletes. That's what I
think. Model guys or model athletes. Because, our guy, I've hit either side of that in my sleepers, right? We've got Carl Brooks.
Carl Brooks,
who's got crazy production and awful measurables, like catastrophic measurables to the point where you're like, this cannot function at the next level. But I love that dude's tape. Or you take a look at Nick Hampton, who's got elite production elite measurables and elite production, but just missing something, missing the size.
Just for fun, I want to talk about the 2 Houston guys really quick.
Okay.
Because the data loves, they're really, really productive players. Derek Parrish, and they're completely different. Derek Parrish, listed at 6'2", 245. He's got the shortest arms and wingspan by about 8. He's 8 inches below the average wingspan.
8 inches?
7 inches, sorry. And 4 inches below the average arm length. Average arm length at edge. So you always say, this guy looks like a child. I mean, he looks like a little child rushing the passer and just wins.
Okay.
Right? Derek Parrish. So, I mean, he's on the consensus board, he's like UDFA, basically. 327. And then you have DeAnthony Jones, who's 6'2", 270. And his production's off the charts. But his so in my model, 95th percentile production guy, 0.6th percentile combine guy.
0.6?
0.6th. So basically second worst out of anybody maybe the worst that I've even seen. His cone 772. Shuttle 459. He ran a 5.12 40 with a 10 split of my record. Basically 179. I was a 183. I was a 183 guy at my best. That's pretty impressively not good. And even for a bigger, huskier guy, he doesn't have good length or any of that stuff. They were just fascinating because both of those guys were unbelievably productive with completely different body types and athleticism measures that just the NFL's not even going to look at them. But they're fascinating because it's fun.
Parrish had a 6.763 cone time.
Yeah, I mean, he's a
very,
linebacker. I
very
mean, if you're
fast.
bringing him into the NFL, he's a linebacker. And every year I also get enamored with, here's this guy who was an edge rusher. You move him to linebacker, and he'll be a blitz weapon or whatever.
Right.
And there's a couple, like Frankie Louvu is like the one. Yeah, there's a handful of those guys who are actually used around the NFL.
Oh, who was the guy? Damn it, I shouldn't even bring this up. I can't remember his name. Because there was another undersized edge rusher that just was never going to get a shot to play edge rusher.
In our data?
Yeah.
The Oklahoma guy? Striker.
Yeah. No, not him, but same idea.
Sutton Smith.
Yes, Sutton Smith.
Became
He's now
a fullback. Yeah.
But he was like 6'2", 215 or something. Like, you know, like
Northern Illinois, Sutton Smith, yeah.
Is that Parrish? Is that what we're talking about?
Basically, except Sutton Smith's grades were even better. I mean, he was off the charts.
And he was even smaller.
And he was tiny, absolutely tiny. But yeah, that was great. A lot of fun.
All right.
Your edge defenders.
Done.
Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Now, here's the deal. Tomorrow, forget Rogan, forget Barstool and their whole series, forget McAfee. Tomorrow is the biggest podcast in the history of the medium.
In the medium. This is bigger than Aaron Rodgers showing up to announce nothing.
It is. Aaron Rodgers is going to show up and talk about the darkness and talk in circles and the whole deal.
I like this because the people that didn't hear the first thing, of how you undersold it, you have to big it up. Like Joe Rogan would always tell you this fight is the greatest fight that's ever happened in the history of humanity.
I'm learning.
This fighter is the greatest of all time, the greatest human to ever live. That's Rogan's sales pitch. So you need to go loftier. But if you didn't hear that the first time, you would just think you're overselling this, which is clearly not what's happening.
Nope. It's an average sell.
Because that's, Ben Stockwell messaged me. He's like, I feel like you're overselling it with this tease, I'm like, no.
Does Ben know what's actually happening? Has he gotten word?
I think so, yeah. But he didn't he didn't hear obviously the first part where I was like, no, you're underdoing this. You need to go bigger, go loftier.
In business, you tend to want to undersell, over-deliver.
Yeah, not in podcasting.
Nope, podcasting, we're going to oversell.
Oversell, under-deliver.
We might under-deliver. We'll see. But let's say tomorrow's Friday show. If you're not normally a Friday show guy, because I'm not there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people do that. Steve won't be there. I'm not tuning in on Friday. I'll be here.
You're back.
I'll be back, and it might be the biggest. It is the biggest podcast in the history of the media.
We're going to need extra chairs. Ones that work.
Going to need extra chairs.
Yeah.
That's it. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow for the big show.